Hi everyone! Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Nikki, I talk about animation, and today I am going to cover the other half of the Stolitz love story with the Blitz perspective. Now, in case you haven't watched my Stolas video yet, I am breaking down Blitz and Stolas' characters in order to discern how their relationship ended up in the place that it did. There were several mistakes on both parts. I will do my very best to try not to coddle the characters, but it's very important to remember that we are dealing with characters who are canonically in their 30s and therefore entirely responsible for themselves and their actions and decision making. Though my love for this ship is based entirely on these two being the two biggest idiots in all of fiction, no two characters have ever deserved each other more, and I deserve for them to be together. And now I've set myself up with the very harsh challenge of trying to analyze Blitz. The O is silent. I was working on getting this video out in October, but then I got a bit of a headache, and I realized that even if I worked really hard, it was probably only going to come out a few days before Ghostfuckers, and I thought that episode was gonna give me a lot of missing pieces that I wanted for the analysis, and as it turns out, it didn't. In a lot of ways, the episode confirmed almost all of my analysis. There was only one thing that changed, and I am going to rant a lot about that one thing. And this is important. This analysis is to focus on Blitz's character and his experiences in the whole mess. So if I say anything that seems as if I'm being unfair to Stolas, that is because I've already made an entire hour-long video on his perspective, so go watch that. Now, without further ado, let's talk about Blitz. Alright, so first we're gonna establish Blitz's character. We know that he grew up in a circus where his father, Cash Buxo, was the ringmaster. Cash was, for lack of a better word, a piece of shit of a father. He was an alcoholic. He wasn't shy about renting out his own child to the royal family. Cash was also willing to put his own son in potential danger. But as far as we can tell, Blitz had a pretty good relationship with his mother, his twin sister Barbie Wire, and obviously his bestest friend Fizz. So I would say that they gave him a pretty stable childhood. He clearly had time to play. He also really enjoyed performing alongside Fizz, even though he wasn't the best performer. He felt very confident about his dreams. He wanted to own his own circus business with a big office. Childhood wonderment indeed. But he was also clearly aware that he was participating in helping support his family.
Don't you want to be able to help me and your mama out?
Of course I want to help Mama.
They were clearly poor, but I don't know how poor. But when Cash says that thing about wanting a bigger tent and better food, it doesn't sound as if they don't have any money at all. Or maybe if you just didn't spend all the money on alcohol, maybe you would have more money to support your family. Just a thought. Blitz and Fizz were able to save up enough money to eventually go to a show performed by Mammon, which would not have been a cheap experience.
I mean, I don't know, was it worth all our savings just to have him put on an overhyped commercial and then bitch about taxes and then assault us with clowns, vomit and pass out on stage?
Cash also instills a bit of hatred for royal demons into a young Blitz, although this seems to be a general feeling among the lower classes in Hell.
Everything those rich fucks have will be worth a fortune!
Anyway, as they grew older, it seems that Fizz, being the more talented performer, eventually got a solo act of some kind, whereas Blitz then began performing more with his sister Barbie. He was clearly very supportive of Fizz.
Hey, don't let one asshole get to you, okay? You are plenty good enough.
But he probably also felt a certain amount of inadequacy next to him. When they were teenagers, Blitz developed a crush on Fizz, which was probably mutual, but he apparently had a hard time telling Fizz about his feelings, so he wrote them down in a letter, and when he was going to present Fizz with that letter, he chickened out and ended up pushing over the guy who was carrying Fizz's birthday cake, which then fell over and accidentally set the circus tent on fire. This fire led to an explosion that ultimately cost Fizz all of his limbs, as well as killing Blitz's mother, leaving Blitz with an insane amount of guilt, as well as a very traumatic association with what his love does to people. And then, just to make a bad situation worse, Blitz was rejected and shunned by the circus and his own father at the moment in his life when he needed parental guidance more than any other time. and he was told that Fizz didn't want to see him when he attempted to visit him in the hospital. And seeing as Fizz firmly believed that Blitz had committed arson, Blitz was probably well aware that this was the rumor going around the circus. So this left a barely adult and very traumatized Blitz to fend for himself with no support network, as he had to find his place in hell. There is then a roughly 10-year period of Blitz's early adulthood where he bounced around from place to place. We know that he worked at Lululand as seemingly a vendor and occasional performer. Perhaps it was here that he gave a performance that was so disastrous that he ended up with crippling stage fright.
I can't do this. No, not again. I haven't performed since...
While working at Lululand, his past would also come back to haunt him when Robo-Fizz was introduced, and Blitz developed a rivalry with the robotic version of his former best friend, which was probably not helped by the fact that Fizz became the biggest celebrity in all of hell. So Blitz would be constantly exposed to this mirror from his past, everything he could never measure up to. And Fizz was obviously also his original sin when it comes to romantic love. We also know that he dated Verosica and probably lived in the lust ring for some time. My best guess is that Verosica was probably his first and most likely only really serious relationship. Based on their conversation in Apology Tour, I'm guessing that Blitz primarily dated Verosica because he thought she wasn't the type who would fall in love with him. This would make sense as he wouldn't want to worry about hurting someone or being hurt by someone. And then when she told him she was in love with him, he stole her car, her credit card, and ran away to buy horse riding lessons. I'm guessing their relationship happened when they were fairly young, because it sounds as if their relationship was kind of immature. Also just the fact that Verosica still fell in love with Blitz despite the fact that he is immensely selfish in bed. And the amount of hatred between the pair also says to me that this was a formative experience for them.
How do you think I felt when the fun guy I was dating decided to just bail on me because I made the shitty mistake of saying I love... It was the most embarrassing feeling.
And then likely after this, Verosica's career began taking off, and Blitz once again would be constantly exposed to a person from his past reaching heights he could never aspire to. I'm uncertain of whether I believe Blitz was actually in love with Verosica, or if he was unsure of what his feelings were and he just didn't want to tell her. She clearly did mean a lot to him, even if he wasn't in love with her. But it would make sense that after dating her, he went on to never want to get close enough to anyone ever again. So anyone he dated afterwards, he wanted to be mostly casual with, and if he ever felt like they got too close by, for example, introducing him to their family members, he would find a way to fuck it all up.
Sorry for the comment I made at your sister's wedding, though she did deserve it, she's a whore. Sorry for fucking your mom, though I thought it was your dad.
I imagine that most of the people who attended the anti-Blitzo party are from this period of his life. I keep seeing excuses from people who want to justify Blitz's dating history as him dating succubi and incubi because they are supposed to be unfeeling and therefore it was their fault when they developed feelings for him. I don't think we have any real evidence to say that this is in fact the case for the species. And the other excuse being that Blitz is well within his right to end a relationship with a person if he doesn't want to be with them anymore, which always conveniently ignores the things he confesses to having done to his exes.
God damn it, whore, you will not let that go!
In Truth Seekers, Blitz also mentions he's a college dropout, but it's never brought up again. There was apparently also a time where Blitz was a bit of an infamous party animal, but eventually disappeared from the party scene. At some point, potentially after leaving the performing arts completely behind, he would have also trained to become an assassin. And at some point, his sister became addicted to a drug called H8 and had to go to rehab because of it, and I wouldn't be surprised if Blitz might have either had a hand in her drug problem or in getting her to rehab, and that this was the catalyst for him finally wanting to settle down. But we do know that Barbie didn't want any contact with him, and that the staff at her rehab center knew to tase him on sight. And seeing as every character from his past refers to him as Blitzo, I'm guessing it was near the end of this 10-year period that he decided to silence the O before beginning his new life. Probably as a result of him not being able to find a romantic relationship he could handle being in, Blitz decided to adopt a hellhound. And probably luckily for everyone involved, he settled on an almost 18-year-old Luna, whom he showers with unconditional love and affection and praise. Not too long after this, he ended up in prison in the Greed Ring, where he met Moxie, whom he broke out of prison with. And Moxie, in need of a positive male role model, stuck with Blitz ever since. And now we know that they lived in the Greed Ring, where they were running their assassination business in the early days, which eventually led them to cross paths with Millie, and Blitz, recognizing her talents as an assassin, decided to hire her. And together, the IMP foursome ran a apparently successful enough assassination business in the Greed Ring, until Blitz for some reason decided that to achieve upward mobility, he had to rearrange his business around the most insecure business model ever conceived of. But I am getting a bit ahead of myself. Okay, so we should probably talk about Blitz's psyche and his perception of the world around him. And this is the most difficult part, because Blitz is such a talented liar that he lies to the people around him, he lies to the audience, and he lies to himself. So it took a lot of work for me to break down his character, but I think I got it. Blitz has a decidedly pessimistic view of hell, which makes sense because it's hell, it's supposed to be a bad place, which it obviously is, as violence and murder is an everyday occurrence, capitalism runs rampant, there is a massive class divide between the rich and the poor, and there is a lot of speciesism.
The fuck did you just call me?
It's not polite to call them that to their face, honey. Wait until we're in the car.
But there are still laws and a prison system, and seeing as hell is a society where people live their lives, everyone obviously has a vested interest in living as good a life as possible for them. It is possible to dream big and achieve those dreams, no matter what species you are. And there is room for fun and entertainment everywhere, and there are also healthcare services, and most of the characters are depicted as having morals and caring about others.
I just think it's a bit excessive, and we could be a bit more selective, is all.
But just like the cherubs in the full moon, Blitz views hell with a strong air of prejudice, despite having lived there his entire life. He doesn't view it as it truly is, or how he thinks it should be. He acts accordingly to how he tells himself it is, but he doesn't like what he tells himself it is. For example, Blitz acts like a complete asshole, but he rationalizes that everyone's an asshole, so he's not being any worse than anyone else.
Everyone's shitty! Hello, we live in hell!
However, he hates it when people are assholes to him, and he especially hates it when people are assholes to the people he cares about. Another thing, he claims that relationships and monogamy are boring, yet he consistently voyeurs on Eminem and fantasizes about inserting himself into their relationship because he really wants a relationship like they have. But because of his trauma, he has put up enormous walls so that no one can get anywhere close to him. And because no one can get close enough to care about him, it really damages his self-esteem and makes him feel unworthy of love. I think the inadequacy he felt as a teenager around Fizz because Fizz was the better performer was what ultimately led him to not being able to confess his feelings for Fizz. That and his father's clear favoritism of Fizz. And having always participated in supporting his family, Blitz sees his own primary value as what he can provide for others. He doesn't trust that people will stick by him if he's not useful to them. And he is so convinced that everyone will just abandon him eventually that he keeps everyone at arm's length so that it won't hurt as much when they eventually leave him. Which makes it nearly impossible for him to form connections with people, which is truly sad because Blitz craves for people to want to be around him. But because Blitz hates himself so much, he acts like a person that others shouldn't want to be around, so it's not a surprise when people don't want to be around him. And he holds on to any excuse he can think of for people not to care about him. He also acts aloof and indifferent to other people's feelings, and pretends that he doesn't understand how others feel. And I have a theory that his horrible spelling is part of this aloof persona, because his ability to spell varies greatly from what situation he's in.
The B-U-L-L shit that my daughter has to get every year that you M-O-T-H-E-R fuckers.
And he clearly puts a lot of energy and effort into his standoffish persona. The interesting thing about Blitz is that he developed all of these negative coping mechanisms while he was alone in the world, but in the show itself, he has a relative stability around him. And that is because of his own decision making. He decided to adopt Luna, he decided to open IMP. But I think we need to establish how important IMP is to Blitz. Obviously, owning his own business is pretty impressive for an imp, And it was also his childhood dream in a new coat of paint. But it is through IMP that Blitz finds the stability he really craves. Because not only does he have a job, a steady income, and an identity through being an assassin, IMP also provides him with the stability and security of having people around him. Because Luna, Millie, and Moxie are not just his employees, they are his friends and his family, and he has no other network outside of his business. This stability is crucial to Blitz's development in the series. And we can see how much his little found family means to Blitz. He has a giant portrait of all 4 of them in his office. The lock screen on his phone is another photo of all of them. He has pictures of Luna and M&M all over his apartment with his own face crossed out. He draws little doodles of them all the time, and he wants to spend his free time with them. And it makes sense that Blitz would be really comfortable with the 3 of them, because they are probably the people who have stuck by him the longest in his adult life. However, he still thinks this is because of IMP and not because of him as a person. He has a hard time recognizing exactly how much his approval means to Moxie, and that Luna does in fact love him, even though she doesn't love his over-exaggerated displays of affection. Although this is because he doesn't think that Moxie should be seeking his approval.
Look, I'm hard on you because I know what you're capable of, Mox.
And because he was left to his own devices when he was a new adult without any parental guidance or affection of any kind. So he showers a reluctant Luna with all of the love and affection he wishes he had received when he was her age. And then his relationship with Millie is the most positive of the 3 of them because she isn't constantly seeking his approval, and he doesn't shower her with over-exaggerated praise, but only praises her when she deserves it, which granted is most of the time. It's also interesting to note that Blitz has decorated IMP's office with memorabilia from his past in the circus, which was the last time he had stability in his life. Yet for all the good IMP can provide for Blitz, there is one thing he cannot get from Luna or the M&Ms. And that is that none of them can be his person. The person he loves, who loves him back more than anything else in the whole wide world. But romantic love is the thing Blitz fears more than anything else in the world, because the first time he ever felt it, he couldn't bring himself to act upon it, and as a direct result, he lost everything that was dear to him. And my theory is that in the IMP era of his life, Blitz has not dated anyone and has strictly only used hookup apps for sexual encounters while partially getting his emotional fill through his friends. And he also purposefully lives in a 1-bedroom apartment with Luna where he has to sleep on the couch because that way he can safeguard himself so that all of his sexual encounters have to happen outside of his own home. But Blitz clearly does want to have a romantic someone in his life, which is why he constantly voyeurs on M&M. He fantasizes about inserting himself into their relationship because he wishes he had a relationship like they have. But because he doesn't think he could be half of such a relationship, if he could be in a relationship that was already functioning, then he would be golden. But Blitz has a skewed perception of what love really is supposed to feel like. When he's talking to Vorosica in Apology Tour, he begins ranting about how he didn't fall head over heels for anyone at the party. And it's a very specific choice of words, falling head over heels, because it indicates that Blitz thinks he's supposed to fall hard in love with someone in order for the love to be real and deserving of a partner. And this makes sense considering Blitz spends every day next to the 2 most loving turtle doves in all of hell, because M&M are obvious couple goals, they love each other completely, they will do anything for each other, they are a constant public display of affection. Millie will go to any length to protect Moxie's life, Moxie writes beautiful songs to Millie, so being around that all the time, Blitz gets a bit of a skewed ideal of what love is supposed to look like. And it is really interesting when you consider an episode like Unhappy Campers when M&M have their first on-screen fight, and Blitz isn't around to see this part of their relationship and see that they make up afterwards, which would give him a better understanding of how even the most perfect of couples sometimes have falling outs and they need to work through those things. We also learn in Ghost Fuckers that one of Blitz's insecurities regarding M&M is because they have each other to love, he feels overlooked by them. And interestingly enough, despite always voyeuring on them, he actually doesn't like it when they just make out in front of him.
Can you two not?
But the one kind of love Blitz definitely does feel is unconditional love. There are very few people in hell that Blitz cares about, but the people he does care about, he cares wholeheartedly and completely for. He will will do absolutely anything for those people, and he holds them in the highest regard. But sadly, because of his own self-hatred, part of this highest regard he feels towards others is that they couldn't possibly care about him because he is not worthy of being cared about. So with all of these walls Blitz has put up to prevent himself from getting hurt or hurting others, if he was ever to fall in love, it would take either a miracle or pure dumb luck.
Blitzy! I'm here.
Or both. Both is good. Yes, because when we really think about it, Blitz falling in love with Stolas is the culmination of many tiny things that just so happen to fit together. A lot of it comes down to how Stolas actively behaves towards Blitz, but there are also a lot of other things that aren't even related to Stolas that contribute to the way Blitz's mind changes and makes him bolder and helps him to grow. So let's take a journey. A standout thing about Stolas is that he is a direct contrast to part of Blitz's worldview. As a child, Blitz was raised to hate royal demons because they're rich. And as an adult, he still carries some hatred towards them, perhaps because of another traumatic incident that seems to have been hinted at, but as I'm making this video, we don't know anything yet. What we do know is that Blitz has a low opinion of royal demons, and regards them as snobby and not interested in the lower classes. However, Stolas easily disproves this mindset. When they first meet as children, Blitz obviously doesn't like that he's being forced to have a playdate with this weird prince, but gradually he does warm up to him. Stolas was the only one who laughed during his performance. They have fun playing around the castle, and when they're under the tree they talk about what they're gonna do as adults, and Blitz tells Stolas his whole dream for his future, and Stolas is nice and encouraging about Blitz's dreams. And this memory is clearly something that Blitz holds on to for the next 25 years, at the very least because of the grimoire when he breaks into Stolas' palace on his anniversary. And once again, during this first meeting, Blitz is confronted with a contrast to his worldview. He got caught, and now he's expecting that Stolas will punish him in some way. Stolas is just happy to see his old friend and begins flirting with Blitz.
I recall how you enjoy making an entrance.
And Blitz seizes this opportunity to try and distract Stolas so that he won't notice when he's stealing the grimoire. But one thing very interesting about the scene is that Blitz is acting very stupid. He plans to steal from Stolas, but when Stolas makes small talk with him, like asking him about his job, Blitz tells him the truth, and later on, he gives him his actual name, which is clearly not the smart thing to do in this situation. But Blitz is lonely, he is starved for attention, so Stolas showing even the basic interest in him is appealing. Albeit it's more on a subconscious level, because on his conscious level, Blitz doesn't have any intention of ever seeing this bird ever again. Yet he still feels a connection to Stolas, which is why he stops himself from just leaving after he has tied Stolas to the bed. Because Stolas calls him his first ever friend, a reference back to the first time they met. And Stolas is the last person who knew Blitz when he was a child who doesn't hate him. Which means that if Blitz just runs off now with the grimoire, he is going to cut the final string to his past, and that's the string he never even considered he had, because he assumed that Stolas as a royal would be too important to remember that playdate he had with a lowly imp. Initially, it would seem like a pity bang, but at the same time, it's like we have never seen Blitz show this level of compassion towards anyone else, so there has to be something special about Stolas. And clearly, the connection between them is so strong that the real fast turns into an all-nighter. But Blitz is definitely lucky that he chose to go through with the bang session, because if he didn't, I don't think Stolas would have been particularly kind to him for tying him to a bed and running off with his property. And because Blitz was the idiot who gave up important information that would have made it so easy for Stolas to find him, he would have lost the grimoire within like an hour of stealing it. And let's be real here, Blitz stealing the grimoire and agreeing to the arrangement are the dumbest things he could possibly do. And now it's time for the rant. Because are you kidding me? Did I not expect the reason for Blitz stealing the grimoire to just be because he did? Like, I had a lot in this analysis that was like, oh, Blitz probably stole the grimoire because he was trying to keep IMP together because they were having financial troubles. But no! Blitz might as well have just woken up one morning and thought, you know what, I feel like a change. I want to kill the living. How do I do that? Oh, right, 25 years ago I met this prince and he told me he had this book that would give him access to the living world. So I'm just gonna go steal it because, you know, he probably isn't using it for that very important thing he was supposed to use it for. whatever. And then what, after he steals the grimoire, he runs off to lease an office space in the Pride Ring and then moves himself and the whole business there, based around the idea that they can now run their business differently through a stolen item that he seriously could not believe he was going to keep in the long haul. This is so dumb. This is so risky. He really put himself, Luna, and Eminem deep into this business model has to succeed no matter what. And there's just no feasible way he could seriously believe that he could keep the grimoire indefinitely. I was seriously expecting Ghostfuckers to either reveal some kind of additional trauma from his past, or we would get his past recontextualized so that we would know the order of events in his early adulthood. But instead we just learn that the entire arrangement is predicated on the fact that Blitz is an idiot who just wanted upward mobility. Now, I will hold Stolas entirely accountable for suggesting the arrangement in the first place, as well as the specifics of the payment, and the fact that the arrangement was agreed upon in a way that is not fantastically consensual. But I insist on holding Blitz accountable to himself for accepting the arrangement and for upholding it for as long as he does. Because he clearly knows that there are alternatives to getting to the human world outside of the grimoire. He dated several members of the succubi and incubi species, so he is aware that Asmodean crystals exist. This is proven in the episode Unhappy Campers. And from a business perspective, a crystal would be a better solution for IMP, as they couldn't seriously believe they would be able to hold on to a stolen, infinitely powerful artifact. So since this was his idea, Blitz should have sought out a crystal. He could have either stolen one, bought one illegally, or he could have hired a person who was granted a crystal so as to avoid running his business illegally and being indebted to Stolas, who could take back the grimoire at any point he wanted. But the thing is, for Blitz, the arrangement is quite enticing. First of all, he already believes that his own value is only what he can provide for others, and therefore all relationships he has are in some way transactional. But the thing that really gets Blitz about the arrangement is that Stolas wants him. Even if it's just his body, he still wants him. And Blitz is lonely. He has such a limited network of people who actually want to stick around him. So the fact that Stolas wants him, wants anything to do with him at all, even after he stole from him, that is ultimately really appealing to Blitz. And Blitz already has a very messed up relationship to sex and to his own body. He has enough excess to fill an entire house party, and we have seen him use sex as both bribery, a coping mechanism, and an investigation tactic. And he apparently also used it at least once to break up with one of his exes. But judging by the party, probably many more times. And he uses his sexuality to keep other people at arm's length, and sexualizes anyone he isn't related to as a way to detach emotionally from people.
Would it fuck up the moment if we made out right now?
So ultimately, why not use it as a trade-off so he can run his business better? And obviously, keeping the grimoire is essential for IMP to run, and keeping his found family together. And this is where the stability of IMP comes into play, because for the past 5 years, Blitz has had 3 people around him who look up to him in some way because he is a good leader. And this relative security is important for Blitz to be able to form new relationships. He needs a base camp to know that he will have people even if other people leave. So the security and stability of Luna and the M&Ms allows Blitz to just relax in his arrangement with Stolas. He is not trying to hold on to Stolas in an emotional way. He only has to have sex with him. And in one of Blitz's healthier ways of thinking, he finds a way to make the thing he has to do into something he also enjoys. And Blitz is a perpetually horny and kinky character, so having this newly sexually liberated and very thirsty owl, who is clearly very open-minded to anything Blitz throws at him, it ends up becoming fun. And it also means that Blitz now has another stable person in his life, which he actually comes to need, as Luna and M&M have other priorities in their lives. So far, Luna's arc is that she's seeking more independence from Blitz, trying to make some friends. She's also clearly becoming more open-hearted, like it's her natural instinct to call Blitz dad. They do bond at the party in Queen Bee. She's able to give Via some actually good advice. And in the full moon, she shows concern about Eminem and blows up an entire building to save them from plummeting to the ground. And in Ghostfucker, she does agree to help Millie by looking after Moxie, which is also just nice because I need the rest of the characters to begin connecting. And at the same time, we see that Blitz's smothering behavior is beginning to loosen as the show goes on. He has more faith in her ability to fight and trusts her to navigate LA on her own to find Via. And we can also see that he begins to understand he has to treat her more like an adult, like he has to set boundaries with her at work. But the most interesting development in their relationship is in the full moon, when Luna suggests that Stolas is getting bored with Blitz, and this is Blitz's response.
How do you know, Luna?
So through attaching himself to Stolas, Blitz has become less approval-seeking from Luna and begins treating her more like a friend than like a baby. Although it also becomes a bit of a detriment to Luna that Blitz begins seeing her like an adult when he then suffers his heart breakdown and makes her burn all those taxidermy owls. It is kind of odd that Blitz is both terrified that people will leave him, but he's actually reached a point where he's pretty much taken IMP for granted, as if the other three will continue to be around because of the business, so his behavior ultimately doesn't matter. The thing I find most interesting about Blitz's relationship to Stolas in Season 1 is that despite the fact that the grimoire belongs to Stolas and he has complete say over it, Blitz has this completely absurd faith in Stolas, or in the transactional nature of their relationship, that he allows himself to treat Stolas however he wants. He is a complete jerk to him.
Yeah, you can unclench your bird puss, Stolas.
Blitz does everything in his power to appear as disinterested in Stolas as possible. Even though you'd assume that Stolas having all of the control over the grimoire would make Blitz behave like a complete sycophant towards him, like being at his beck and call whenever he wanted him. But Blitz is completely confident in the continued survival of IMP, so instead Blitz just does this thing he does, and he acts like a complete asshole. But because Stolas doesn't react to Blitz's assholery and just puts up with his bullshit, his persistence actually makes Blitz feel better. It's the same as we see with his relationship with Millie as of Ghostfuckers. Blitz understands that the people who can stand by his behavior must actively care about him. So the longer Stolas holds out with him, the more Blitz has to accept that Stolas wants to be here with him. Blitz actively believes that Stolas is too good for him, but he never appears to question why Stolas would have a transactional affair with him. Like, for all intents and purposes, Stolas is quite the catch. He is a rich, magical prince, and Blitz is very attracted to him. So Blitz would probably at some point question why it had to be him. Why Stolas couldn't have had an affair with literally anyone else and not been involved in an illegal business practice. So with the relative security of Stolas sticking around, Blitz unconsciously attaches himself to Stolas. And the ways in which Blitz begins attaching himself emotionally to Stolas are quite subtle. Obviously, in the first couple episodes, Blitz is clearly annoyed with Stolas. And justifiably so, because Stolas comes off quite condescending whenever he mentions that Blitz is an imp, and he insists on calling him Blitzy. Although Blitz mostly puts up with this, only really objecting to his nickname once in the Harvest Moon Festival.
Say my name right, fucking dick.
Yet he yells over a crowd, so Stolas probably doesn't hear him. Otherwise, his objections are mostly just scowling. And I think this is because, just as Stolas is putting up with Blitz, Blitz is also putting up with Stolas. Because if he actively objects to the way Stolas treats him, then Stolas would also be in the right to object to the way Blitz treats him. But one thing I find particularly interesting about Lululand is that Blitz's cold demeanor is so over the top, it has to be performative. First of all, the amount of money Stolas would be offering for Blitz to even agree to play bodyguard for him if he absolutely hates him, and that it has to be at Lululand where Blitz would then have to confront part of his past that he doesn't like. It would either have to be a lot, or IMP was just having a very slow business day. But Blitz does agree to go, yet his behavior is a bit all over the place. He begins by setting very firm boundaries with Stolas that they will not be having sex in the amusement park. Yet Blitz also just lets Eminem run off, which then leaves him as the sole bodyguard of Stolas and Via. And even though he has this really serious demeanor on his face, the way he's acting otherwise is so exaggerated it becomes goofy. And at certain times he's not even paying proper attention to Stolas, and he lets himself get easily distracted by RoboFizz before getting into a fight and setting the entire park on fire. So from this episode, we can see that Blitz works so hard to keep up the performance of what he wants the world to think he's feeling. And he especially does that around Stolas. Blitz's aloofness and cold demeanor is almost always on display when Stolas is around, although we do have the faintest evidence that he at the very least was having fun in the bedroom. And it is in the opening bedroom scene from the Harvest Moon Festival that we can see the first glimmers of Blitz growing comfortable in this relationship-situationship. Because Blitz is just here relaxing and having a casual conversation with Stolas. And this is where we see the first traces of why Blitz falls for Stolas. Because Stolas is clearly interested in listening to what Blitz has to say, and Blitz is clearly participating in this conversation by just offering some random information about himself and his employees.
Wrath, huh? My employees are from there.
And it is this very simple act of showing Blitz attention that leads to Stolas winning Blitz over. We see this happen again in Ozzy's when Stolas just tries to ask Blitz about his day, and it's enough to distract Blitz from his voyeurism. And apart from that, Stolas does also find Blitz's jokes funny, and he will cuddle up to him if Blitz is sleeping in his bed. And based on his conversation with Fizz in Oops, we can gather that Blitz does understand that these little things that Stolas does for him are displays of affection.
And then he'll call me and try and see how my day was, and he'll pretend to care about me and comment on my photos and laugh at my jokes.
But this is where Blitz's mind comes in and kneecaps him hard. Because with all of his self-hatred, he keeps telling himself that no one could ever possibly care about him, and Stolas especially could never care about him. So he continues to keep Stolas at arm's length, while still letting Stolas fill him with this attention and affection he craves. But he won't reciprocate because he doesn't think he's good enough. So in a way, Millie actually calls it.
The prince is our boss's boyfriend.
Stolas is indeed Blitz's boyfriend, it's just that Blitz is not Stolas' boyfriend. And it is interesting to note that in this scene, Blitz can't bring himself to tell Stryker what his and Stolas' relationship isn't, so he defaults to saying what it definitely is.
But he's not like, you know, we're not doing what's between, it's a transactional fucking, you see.
And Blitz does everything to prevent himself from showing any care towards Stolas. And the worst thing he does is that once he prevents Stryker from assassinating Stolas, Blitz decides not to warn Stolas that there is an assassin after him. And of course he insists to himself that Stolas is an all-powerful Goetial demon who would have no trouble if an assassin came after him. But what it really boils down to is that Blitz is terrified that if he warns Stolas about Stryker, it would be an indicator that he actually cares about him in even just the smallest of ways. Which would go against his carefully cultivated asshole persona, which is really dumb. And also seems like a contrast to Blitz's natural protective instincts around the people he cares about. These protective instincts that he had already as a teenager when he defended Fizz from an aggressive fan, and he puts it on display in Truth Seekers when he holds out his arms to shield Luna and Eminem from the dorks. And these protective instincts are Blitz's love language. But again, his focus is always on what he can provide for others, so he never considers that anyone might provide protection for him. And that is exactly why Stolas' biggest win in regards to Blitz comes in Truth Seekers, when Stolas goes full-on demonic raven creature and traumatizes the dorks for threatening Blitz. Which obviously means so much more to Blitz after his bad trip. Especially since when he was tripping, Blitz sought out the hallucination of Stolas as a protective haven from all of the other negative voices haunting him. The hallucination reveals that Blitz feels safe with Stolas, he feels more like himself, and as the Moxie hallucination tells him, he craves intimacy, but he is unsure what it actually is. He just knows that he likes the way he feels when he is around Stolas. Unfortunately, it's also clear that part of the safety Blitz feels with Stolas is a result of the shackles, i.e. their arrangement through the grimoire. Blitz doesn't feel confident enough that he could be with Stolas just as he is, that he is good enough as he is. He has to have the security blanket of their arrangement in order to feel like Stolas wants him, because that's what makes sense in his head. It's also noteworthy that Blitz turns his head away from Stolas as he's yelling at the Moxie hallucination to shut up and leave him alone. Yet when the Stolas hallucination disappears, there's a terrified look in his eyes when he's watching as the golden feathers that represent Stolas mix with the mud that represents everybody else. And Stolas' voice is the only one that repeats the "you're gonna die alone" line over and over, while all of the other voices only say it once. So in a way, Blitz both views Stolas as the only one who can save him from his crippling loneliness, but is also terrified that he will leave him. It's also interesting to note that when the Stolas hallucination first appears, he says this.
Are you afraid to love people, Blitzy?
Which could be translated to, "Are you afraid to love me?" Another thing about the hallucinations is that Blitz is confronted with his feelings about being alone, and that on a subconscious level he is aware that his aloof and standoffish behavior could push away the people he cares about. And he's struggling with whether or not he can handle being alone, or if he needs to have people in his life. This is where Stryker is an interesting foil to Blitz, because Stryker is both the person Blitz wishes he could be and the person he fears he could become. Stryker doesn't have any ties to anyone, he seemingly doesn't care about anyone, which is a mindset that would be a great relief for Blitz if he could have, that he didn't have to worry so much about his fears of being alone, but at the same time, Stryker is too comfortable being alone, and Blitz does find comfort in caring about others, even if he doesn't like to show it. It's sad how the whole trip sequence led to Moxie willing to open up to Blitz and confront him about what he needs from him as a boss, and Blitz can respond to being confronted, but he doesn't bring up his own fears. Although when they were first exposed to the truth gas, Blitz did complain that Moxie prioritizes spending time with Millie over spending time with him.
Do you ever honestly shut up about Millie? It's always, oh, how's Millie? I can't tonight. I'm hanging with Millie. I'm so worried about Millie. And she's always 5 fucking feet away from you. It's pathetic.
Which just makes sense, but Blitz is willing to take in for himself what he learned through his hallucination, which is that he does like Stolas. So when Stolas shows up and rescues him, and then checks on Blitz to see if he's alright, Blitz's face relaxes into Stolas' hands as he's cupping his cheeks. For a moment we can see that it means a lot to him that Stolas would come and save him, but he's upset when Stolas then reprimands him about not getting him in trouble. However, Blitz gets over this immediately, as he readily accepts it when Stolas picks him up like a little princess and requests a thank you. And this scene reveals an interesting clue to us, because as Stolas is moving in to give Blitz what appears to be a gentle kiss, there is a certain look in Blitz's eyes that indicate momentary panic. And based on some of his dialogue in Apology Tour, I see this as evidence that Blitz was aware all the way back in Truth Seekers that Stolas had feelings for him, but that he was afraid of what consequences those feelings would bring. So instead of letting Stolas just kiss him, Blitz pulls on the back of Stolas' head and makes it very clear that they're going to have some very freaky sex that night, as a way to squash any romantic feelings. And then he pulls Stolas into a kiss that is entirely tongue-based. In a way, this is an alternative to Blitz's usual MO, where he will push people away if they get too close to him. But with Stolas, he focuses on constantly reminding both of them that their situationship is entirely sexual. That is, until he makes the very questionable decision of inviting Stolas to Ozzy's. Now obviously, Blitz is impulsive and has a bad habit of making dumb decisions where he doesn't consider the wider consequences, but Ozzy's is just on a whole other level. Because in his quest to stave off loneliness by voyeuring on Eminem, Blitz decides to send the very mixed message to Stolas of inviting him on a date that isn't actually a date, and then not treating it as if it's a date, even though he confirms at least twice that it is in fact a date.
Are you asking me on a date, Blitzy?
Yes, I suppose that is what's happening.
This is our first real date, after all.
Oh, yeah. I guess this is, huh?
I will never quite understand why he didn't just ask Stolas to help him get into the club instead of lying to him. Especially because at this point, Blitz is already aware that Stolas has feelings for him, hence why he feels confident enough that Stolas will agree to go on the date with him. He just doesn't expect that Stolas' feelings for him are as strong as they turn out to be when Stolas arrives all dressed up for their date, and Blitz likes it, as the street lamp informs us. It's a nice confidence boost for him that Stolas would show up all dressed up for him, but this highlights the problem that Blitz has with the fact that Stolas thinks this is a date, is that Blitz is kind of disappointed with the reality that this is technically their first date. And for him, it's not even a real date, and now he technically has to keep up the facade to Stolas that this is a date, even though to him it isn't, because he's obviously here for a very different purpose. So he has to criticize Stolas' outfit in order to throw him off and set the stage for this isn't actually a date. And yet, despite voyeuring on Eminem, Blitz eventually gives in to Stolas' attempts at having a conversation with him. And for a brief second, Blitz has to consider what asking Stolas on a date will mean for their relationship moving forward. Only for this awkward conversation to be interrupted by something even more awkward when Fizz takes to the stage. And naturally, Blitz would rather hide his problems or hide away from his problems instead of confronting them or admitting them to someone, like telling Stolas he wanted to leave because he didn't want Fizz to recognize him. The thing about this whole mess of a situation is that Blitz, of course, is the type who jumps into action to defend the people he cares about. So when Moxie is being roasted by Fizz and Ozzy, of course Blitz is gonna stand up and defend him.
Hey now, I've watched those two pork many times.
What? Blitz?
And honestly, they make Missionary look relatively exciting.
And because he doesn't think about the wider consequences, he doesn't consider that Fizz, the person he was hiding from, and Veronica, the person who's always nagging him whenever they're in the same vicinity, would gang up on him. Although usually Blitz can handle being bad-mouthed and criticized, but when the spotlight turns onto him, there's this pang of stage fright in his eyes, and his usual smartass persona can't keep him safe from having all of his dirty laundry aired out in front of a room full of people. A room full of people that happens to include Stolas. When Fizz first chastises Blitz for commenting on a relationship, Blitz's eyes flash to Stolas and then back again. He's both embarrassed of the situation unfolding in front of Stolas, but mostly he's embarrassed about the reality that the closest thing he has come to a relationship in a long time is a transactional situationship. And it really only gets worse when attention turns to Stolas. And Blitz feels ashamed for having dragged Stolas into this mess, but he also feels ashamed about what Ozzy says to Stolas about him ruining his family for Blitz. And Blitz obviously doesn't think he's good enough, and especially not good enough for someone to ruin their family over. And seeing as Blitz doesn't think he's good enough for Stolas, the fact that Blitz caused Stolas to ruin his entire family finally dawns on him. And of course it's not a new thing for Blitz to ruin families, but he didn't consider the consequences of his actions when he first seduced Stolas. On the way to the bedroom, they walk past several portraits, so Blitz is aware that there is a family. Yet he comes on hard to Stolas. He is going to do whatever it takes to get a hold of the grimoire. So Blitz is also responsible for what happened to Mia and Stella's family. And even though he doesn't owe them anything personally, he still did a very bad thing to them. And when Fizz puts him in the chair across from Stolas, we can see in Blitz's eyes that he definitely feels ashamed and apologetic as he's looking at Stolas. So he's ultimately not surprised that Stolas would hide his face in the menu, but he is surprised at how much it stings. Obviously, one of Blitz's love languages is standing up for others and being protective. And Stolas had previously protected him, but this time he fails him. So even though Blitz felt a certain safety and security in their arrangement and could tell that Stolas had feelings for him, this moment confirms what he already tells himself, that he's not worthy of love, he's not worthy of being protected, he's not good enough, he's an embarrassment, he is a toy. And even though he's used to feeling all of these feelings, they hurt a lot more now that he actually has feelings for Stolas. So he puts all of his walls back up. He becomes angry, pulls back his hand so Stolas can't comfort him, and calls the night a mistake, which it was. And then once he drops Stolas off at home, he reaffirms what their arrangement is all about.
Stolas, don't act like what we have is anything but you wanting me to fuck you, okay? You make that really clear all the time.
It's exclusively sexual and there's nothing more to it than that. But he clearly wishes there was. There is a tear in his eye and his voice breaks, and the irritation on his face when Stolas tries to salvage the night. He doesn't want to be pitied, but he also doesn't want to allow himself to pretend that there was anything more to this arrangement. Yet even with all of this, Blitz is sad and angry, but he doesn't end the deal. He doesn't even consider ending the deal. And as much as Blitz likes to keep people at a distance, he does so because he's afraid that people don't actually like him and wouldn't want to be around him for him. But with Stolas, he has the arrangement to hold on to. He's not ready to let go of Stolas, and technically he doesn't have to as long as they have their arrangement. And when Stolas hit his face in the menu, it confirmed to Blitz that even though Stolas has feelings for him, they're not strong enough for Stolas to bet everything on their relationship. So even though Blitz could find a way around the arrangement, he doesn't actually have to. And this is where Blitz becomes very self-centered, because all he can think about in this whole mess is his own hurt feelings. He doesn't want to think about how the night affected Stolas as well. He admits as much in the full moon when he sings about how he avoids Stolas' questions. And throughout the entirety of Season 2, he acts as if nothing happened. And everyone around him is more than willing to allow him to not think about what happened. Eminem never confront him about what happened either. Fizz only mentions the date, but he doesn't mention the humiliation. And seeing as Blitz rekindles his friendship with Fizz and becomes friends with Ozzy, he's able to bury the incident because no one confronts him with it. The only person who tried to was Stolas, who sent him a text message apologizing for the incident and asking if they could have a conversation about it, only to then digress as soon as Blitz questioned why. Furthermore, for Blitz, this night doesn't end after the date. It continues when he attends Queen Bee's party, where his focus can then shift to bonding with Luna, and then as a form of retribution after being humiliated by one sin, he defeats another sin in a drinking contest, and then he goes on to allow anyone who has any sexual interest in him to take advantage of him until Luna stops it. And thankfully she takes him home afterwards, because the party ends up recontextualizing the night for Blitz. It wasn't just a disaster date and a humiliation, there was also a victory. So even though he cries himself to sleep this night and has indulged in some very painful memories, he has already put distance between himself and the disastrous night at Ozzy's. But another element of Ozzy's worth considering is that it is another example of the bullshit Stolas ultimately puts up with from Blitz. Because the whole disaster date only happens because Blitz invites Stolas on a fake date and then calls attention to himself and gets them both humiliated. Stolas makes a split-second mistake in hiding his face in the menu, but everything else is on Blitz. So the fact that Stolas is willing to brush off the whole mess and continue their transaction is another confirmation that he actually wants to be here. And the thing we have to recognize about the whole mess is that there probably wasn't a right thing for Stolas to do at Ozzy's. Like, hiding his face in the menu is one thing, but with Season 1 Blitz, at this point uncertain about the feelings between him and Stolas, if Stolas decided to stand up for their relationship in a room filled with people and in any way declare his affections for Blitz, it would probably not have gone well, considering one thing we know about Blitz's dating history is that when he was in an actual relationship with Veronica, they were actually dating. She confessed her love for him, probably in a more private setting, and he just completely destroyed everything. So I would say chances are pretty good that if Stolas stood up for them at Ozzy's, Blitz would have bolted out of the club immediately, tracked down the first Osmodian crystal he could find, then returned to IMP headquarters, grab the grimoire, and then portal it off to Stolas' palace, and then block his phone number. That would be his reaction at this point in the series. And thankfully, he develops more in Season 2. In Seeing Stars, it's clear that Blitz has just completely pushed away the night at Ozzy's from his mind at all. He's not concerned about any awkwardness pertaining to Stolas, because as far as Blitz is concerned, the transactional relationship is just going to continue the way it was. He doesn't feel the need to change it, and if Stolas doesn't feel the need to change it, then there is no need to change it. The only thing about Stolas that concerns Blitz in the episode is that Blitz is terrified that the significantly more powerful magical demon is going to kill him for losing the grimoire and the 17-year-old girl. We also see that Blitz brushes off Moxie's suggestion that Stolas might be more understanding of the situation because he likes Blitz.
Okay, my dick is good, but it is not that good, Moxie.
But as soon as they get to LA and Stolas shapeshifts, Blitz's attitude towards him just completely changes. First of all, Blitz is attracted to Stolas' display of his magical powers, and it probably doesn't hurt that Stolas' and Luna's human forms look just similar enough to give Blitz a tiny illusion of a family. We also see Blitz for the first time take a softer tone when talking to Stolas, and at this point, despite the circumstances, Blitz doesn't feel the need to cower in front of Stolas anymore when he is annoyed that Stolas can't remember a spell that would be able to provide the imps with human disguises. The shared goal and the fact that they are on equal footing in this situation, for the first time makes Blitz view Stolas in a casual context. And it probably doesn't hurt that at this point, Stolas is no longer constantly hitting on Blitz and is no longer calling him Blitzy. These were things he stopped doing in Aussies, and though it doesn't appear as though Blitz registers them, he probably on a subconscious level notices that Stolas has leveled out around him, and therefore he is more comfortable around him too. And then later, when Stolas expresses his fears that Via might be in danger, Blitz feels another connection of common ground to Stolas because both of them are dads. So Blitz feels compelled to comfort Stolas by sending Luna off to find Via, while the two of them have their little side quest adventure together.
She's in great hands.
And this isn't a completely pointless side quest for Blitz, because this is the moment where Blitz overcomes his stage fright with the help of Stolas being there for him. And though we've seen previously that Blitz doesn't exactly appreciate Stolas' overly sexual rants, when Stolas tries to boost Blitz's confidence by complimenting him on his sexual prowess, it actually works, because Blitz does like it. He is attracted to Stolas, he enjoys having sex with him. And because this time the context is different. And then when he's on stage and he finally gets the reception he always dreamt of from an audience, Stolas is there in the crowd to support him, and he is the first person in the crowd who laughs at Blitz's improvised joke. And obviously, because Stolas has a distinctive laugh, which Blitz probably recognizes at this point, he would have felt that just like when they were kids, and so he feels compelled to wink and smile at Stolas. And later, in the midst of the chaos of the set burning down, Blitz catches Stolas by the wrist so he doesn't fall over, and then runs out of the studio, and then eventually they rearrange their hands so that they're holding them while they're running through the streets of LA. Yet, as cute as the shipping vibes are in this episode, we later learn through the text messages on Stolas' phone that Blitz's warmer attitude towards Stolas in this adventure was not carried over to their text messages. He only responds with the absolute bare minimum, even when Stolas thanks him for helping him find Via. We also learn through the text messages that it is after this day that Stolas begins letting Blitz off the hook for the arrangement, but he always frames it as if it's Blitz's choice. Stolas now begins asking every time, "Are you coming over?" And Blitz replies, "Well, of course I'm coming over, that's part of our arrangement." Only for Stolas to then become wonderfully wishy-washy and just say, "Oh, you don't have to if you don't want to." We know that he doesn't come over. And this is again because Blitz is terrified of showing even the slightest modicum of actually liking Stolas. He can't imagine that Stolas would be fine with him just coming over because he wanted to. Like, obviously, if Stolas is giving him the chance to ditch, it's because he doesn't really want him to come over. We can gather from the full moon that it bothers Blitz a lot that Stolas isn't making him come over anymore. But unfortunately, Blitz refuses to reflect on why Stolas might be letting him off the hook. And because Blitz has a business to run and has other adventures to go on, he doesn't have to spend all of his time ruminating on his relationship to Stolas. And one of his little adventures comes in the form of a certain Mr. Chaswick Furman. And Chas is similar to Stryker, another kind of foil to Blitz, because Chas is alone in the world. He has no allies, no loyalties to anyone at all.
Oh, okay. So the horseless friend fucker over here gets a little moolah, and suddenly it's worth wasting our time over?
And though Blitz is not above screwing people over, even his love interests, if he wants to cut them out of his life, he always does it because he's afraid that committing to people will lead to both parties getting hurt. He would never do it for self-preservation like Chas did when he ditched Moxie to avoid going to prison. But the biggest takeaway Blitz gets from Chas is that when they sleep together, Blitz concludes that Chas is terrible in bed, and this is obviously because Blitz has gotten used to a certain standard by now, and that standard is an emotional attachment. From what we know otherwise, Blitz has a very bad track record of being terribly selfish in bed, and Chas is obviously only interested in his own gratification, which is why he even propositions Blitz in the first place. But as we learn in the full moon, when it comes to Stolas, Blitz has paid attention to what he likes and what he doesn't really enjoy. And Blitz is excited about being good in bed for Stolas. But not just completely selflessly, because he knows that Stolas is also paying attention to him and pleasing his needs. So this little detour here begins to change Blitz's relationship to sex and to his own body. I find it quite interesting that post-not breakup from Stolas, Blitz's coping mechanisms have seemingly not included sex at that point. So even though he later on says to Fizz in Oops that he isn't going to be tied down by anyone and just allows himself to have sex with whomever he wants, that doesn't mean he's just going to randomly have sex with anyone he comes across anymore. And through sleeping with Chas, Blitz once again gets himself in trouble because of his voyeuristic tendencies towards M&M, but this then also gratifies part of that voyeurism. Now he's slept with a person who has slept with both of them, so he can sort of move on. It is kind of funny that Blitz attempts to insert himself into M&M's relationship because, as far as we can tell, Blitz is actually not poly. In Apology Tour, we see that Blitz gets full-on jealous of Better Than Blitz guy. But in Western Energy, we get a glimpse that Blitz would like to keep Stolas to himself. Pay attention to Blitz's pupils, and it is clear that Stolas describing Stryker as
Sexy?
kinda stung. This was also my weird little segue into talking about the episode. First of all, we can see that Blitz has softened a lot more to Stolas at this point. Noticeably, he has changed his contact ringtone for Stolas from this to this.
Oh,
which is so cute. He's also a lot nicer at first and not dismissive of the phone call, despite the fact that he doesn't have the time to talk right now. And though it is just an exposition dump, I think it's quite cute the way Blitz is trying to appeal to Stolas as a dad by explaining, "I'm sorry, I can't come help you because I have to take my daughter to the doctors." And it is once again that Blitz likes the fact that Stolas will listen to him. But we can also see that Blitz has to put on this performative anger towards Stolas for getting caught by Stryker.
Christ on a stick of all the days for him to get his stupid feathered ass kidnapped. I have waited 5 fucking years for this appointment. Fuck me in my little red hole!
Because when Blitz decided not to warn Stolas about Stryker, he lied to himself and pretended that Stryker wasn't a threat to Stolas. But now he has the direct consequences of not warning Stolas. And that is his biggest regret, and he comes to beat himself up over it so much. Now, I will give Blitz the benefit of the doubt and say that maybe he genuinely believed that Stolas could not be injured, but could only be killed from a direct hit to either the head or the heart. And so he was hoping that if Stolas could hold out long enough against Stryker, then there wouldn't be any consequences to the situation. But obviously that doesn't negate the fact that he still should have warned Stolas. Blitz absolutely made the right choice in prioritizing Luna, because M&M could save Stolas, but they couldn't take Luna to the doctors, which was obviously also important. But because of his protective instincts and the fact that the whole situation could have been avoided if he had only warned Stolas, Blitz comes to feel so guilty.
He can get hurt?
Especially because when he sends Stolas his well wishes, Stolas replies with, "Thank you, that means a lot to me. Would you like to come visit me?" And he adds a heart, which is the clearest Stolas has ever communicated in text message. So once again, Stolas forgives Blitz for a huge transgression, and this being the big one that Blitz definitely doesn't feel deserving of forgiveness for, which is probably why he can't bring himself to reply to Stolas' messages. And we can see in the 3 episodes between Western Energy and the full moon that Blitz has massive bags under his eyes as if he hasn't been sleeping properly. So instead of going to visit Stolas in the hospital and having to face his mistakes, Blitz then decides to punish himself by going on a quest to find his sister, whom he knows doesn't want to see him. Keeping in mind that Unhappy Campers takes place in the week between Western Energy and Oops, Blitz is spending the week Stolas is in the hospital trying to distract himself from this fact and avoiding the reality that Stolas does want to see him by seeking out Barbie, despite the fact that he knows that she doesn't want to see him. The nurse at her rehab center tells him not to go looking for her. He has to do some really underhanded things in an effort to track her down. And one of these include threatening an incubus to open a portal via an Asmodean crystal because Blitz wants to avoid using the grimoire because of how guilty he feels towards Stolas. And then once he finally tracks down Barbie, he gets rejected.
Just because I'm out of rehab doesn't mean I want to see you. I never want to see you, ever.
Which then serves as the self-punishing confirmation he went looking for in an effort to convince himself that Stolas didn't actually want him to come visit in the hospital. I know that there's a popular talking point that the reason Blitz didn't want to visit Stolas is because he had trauma from when he attempted to visit Fizz and was rejected. But I'm gonna have to call bullshit on that. In this case, Blitz is unfortunately just a coward. He has actual text evidence that Stolas wants to see him, and even if you wanted to argue that the hospital staff might reject him because it's unlikely that an imp would visit a Goetia, all he had to do was reply to Stolas and say that he wanted to come visit, at which point Stolas would have just told the hospital staff to let Blitz come in. It's that simple. However, in the aftermath of this whole debacle, Blitz encounters the most profound change to his character development. I would like to believe that the reason why Blitz finds himself in the greed ring might have to do with the fact that Stryker is also in the greed ring and he was actually tracking him in an effort to put a stop to him once and for all. But once he's here, he encounters Fizz, and through their whole kidnapping misadventure together, they reconcile their broken friendship, and Blitz gets the opportunity to save Fizz and make up for the mistakes of their past, finally reconciling with his original sin, as well as embracing his own strengths when compared to Fizz, that even though Fizz is the better performer, Blitz is the better fighter. And it is the rekindling of his friendship with Fizz that really shakes Blitz up, because now he has one person within his network who has no kind of transactional obligation to stick by him. Fizz is just there because he wants to be there and because Blitz wants him there. Furthermore, Fizz is in a long-term, loving, committed relationship with a sin, and that reality defies one of Blitz's coping mechanisms in regards to Stolas, wherein he uses the class difference as the reason why Stolas could never care about him. I gotta be honest though, that as strong as the character writing is in the show, I do feel like the world building at this point is a little bit ambiguous with regards to the hierarchical class system. Obviously there's a difference with regards to wealth and magical powers and status in this world, but basically the Hellhounds seem to be the only species that are actively oppressed.
Maybe you could adopt this one here. Quite a strong lad. He'll be perfect for whatever work you want to use him for.
While everyone else in the society, even all the way up to the Sins, are locked into their stations pretty much based on expectations. How Asmodeus is expected to look down upon love because he is the sin of lust. Yet once his relationship to Fizz is public knowledge, the whole crowd is just super excited. And Wilf is mentioning that no Goetia has ever behaved like Stolas before, i.e. getting a divorce, but it is still possible for him to seek a divorce. And then of course there is Millie's past mindset.
Imps don't work for themselves!
Yet Blitz grew up in a circus that was owned and operated by the imps themselves. Crimson is a mob boss, Wally Wackford is an opportunistic enterpriser who is all over hell, and obviously IMP themselves. So basically it seems that it's the societal understanding of their species that's holding most demons in place and making them not want to break the mold. It's not that there are any laws that are inherently preventing them from doing so. And from what we know about Blitz, he doesn't have an inherent hang-up about being an imp with regards to what he can achieve, at least not professionally. In fact, Blitz seems quite proud of being an imp. He literally named his business after his species. He also clearly believes in himself and the rest of his team, and believes that they achieved what they did because of who they are and not despite of their species.
I brought you into this company for a reason, okay? You're tougher, smarter, and frankly more capable than anyone I've ever met in any ring. And I'm more fuckable and business savvy than any succubitch alive. Looney's perfect, and Moxie's probably got some good traits too, and I'm sure we'll figure them out eventually.
Although he is not above prejudice, even towards other imps, such as believing that the imps of the Wrath Ring are inbred, and he has a very specific hang-up about the succubi and incubi species. This could potentially be because he dated a lot of succubi and incubi, so perhaps he has a personal grievance with enough of them to decide that the whole species is just bad. And then he feels the inverse about imps, because there are enough imps that he loves that he is able to look at them as individuals, which is why he can still justify to himself that Ozzy loves Fizz while Stolas couldn't possibly love him. This is where the conversation he has with Fizz in the cage is really interesting, because when Fizz insinuates that Stolas has feelings for Blitz, Blitz responds like this.
Hey, Stolitz only cares about having a rugged peasant raw dog him into his mattress. It's nothing, you know, it's nothing else.
Which is both that he is completely in denial about Stolas' feelings for him because he doesn't want them to be true. He's afraid of the complications of Stolas having feelings for him. But the sadder and much more interesting part of it is that Blitz is defending Stolas against what he considers to be a terrible accusation, and that is that Stolas would have such poor taste as to be in love with him. Although he continues his denial and spins it into the whole class thing, but then when Stryker butts in and pretty much agrees with Blitz, Blitz has to consider if he really wants to have the same opinion of Stolas as the guy who tortured and tried to murder him.
Oh great, the fucking supremacist is on my side, wonderful.
Which, as we learn in Apology Tour, he definitely doesn't want to have. It's also noteworthy that there are some similarities between Fizz and Stolas' personalities that are probably what attracts Blitz to both of them. They are both sensitive, gentle, and overall good-natured, while also being quite sassy and has the capacity for petty bitchery. We love to see it. So it makes sense that this is kind of Blitz's type. Also, he likes being protective of others, which he has provided for both of them. But a noticeable difference between the two of them is that Fizz is more someone who needs to be protected and taken care of, while he can't really provide the same for someone else, which is why Ozzy is a good match for him as someone who is more of a caregiver who doesn't need quite the same in return. But Stolas is capable of being protective and can provide that for Blitz. And because that is something that Blitz also needs from others, Stolas is a better match for him that way, so that they can give each other what they need. In a way, the fact that Stolas is a dad and he has showered Blitz with a lot of unconditional affection and attention is a huge factor in why Blitz falls in love with him. Because since Blitz was orphaned just as he entered adulthood and hasn't had anyone to show him all of this love and affection, he has taken on this dad role to the rest of IMP. He's not just Luna's adoptive father, he is the team dad for everyone, as perfectly illustrated in the fight scene in Truth Seekers. And Stolas' appearance in Truth Seekers is paralleled by Blitz's vision of his mother in Ghostfuckers. Their silhouettes are similar, and maybe the fact that Blitz seems to have a bit of an attraction to people who are taller than him is also related to his mother, who was quite tall. And of course, another thing being that Stolas cups Blitz's cheeks to check if he's okay, and his vision of his mother also cups his cheeks to comfort him. Blitz has become so dependent on Stolas as this caregiver he hasn't had in 15 years. Because he needs guidance, and he's really afraid of making decisions because he's afraid that he's going to make the wrong decisions. Which is, in a weird way, why the power dynamic between himself and Stolas is actually a strange comfort. There is such a divide between them, with status, with wealth, with magical powers, even their height difference. Stolas is so far out of Blitz's reach, he can't see them as equals. He can't see that he could be and deserves to be an equal partner in their relationship. But what he can see from the divide between them is that Stolas could take all of the power over him. He could put him in golden shackles and manacles and claim him completely. And if he would do that, if he would completely unambiguously claim Blitz as his, then Blitz wouldn't run the risk of ruining their relationship if he didn't have to make any decisions. In that sense, Blitz has a strange comfort in being Blitzy, in the possessive pronouns, my little imp, my impish little plaything. Blitz wants to be loved, but if he has to be an equal partner in a relationship, then he can make mistakes, and he knows that from experience. But with Stolas, he has found a strange comfort in that any time he has moved towards Stolas in any way, it's been because of a situation wherein he didn't really have a choice. Aside from the fact that he himself chose to steal the grimoire. But he didn't have much choice in the moment he agreed to the arrangement. It wasn't really a difficult decision for him to agree to be Stolas' bodyguard in Lululand, because it was either do you want to earn money or do you want to sit around doing nothing? Same way with the Harvest Moon Festival, it wasn't really that much of a decision. Do you want to do something fun since you can't do your work otherwise? And again in Truth Seekers, it wasn't much of a decision to go home with Stolas since he had already picked him up. But then in Ozzy's, it was Blitz's active choices that ruined what they had at that point. And this carries over into season 2. Seeing Stars doesn't really present Blitz with much of a choice. Octavia steals the grimoire, so he has to call Stolas. He has to spend the day with him. And even though he fights the production team of the sitcom, he's still thrown into the van. He is forced to perform. And he only ends up going on stage and overcoming his stage fright because Stolas makes him go on stage. But then after that, everything is choices. Do you want to come over? And he chooses wrong. Would you like to come visit me in the hospital? And he chooses wrong. Blitz lacks the confidence to understand that the reason Stolas is giving him choices is because he wants Blitz to be happy as well. And this is the hurdle that Blitz has to overcome if he wants to be happy. He has been really lucky that he has had IMP for 5 years already, but he doesn't have a stable alternate safety net for the potential changes in the future. Luna is growing more independent. Eventually she will have friends and she might even have a partner, and she will want not to live in a 1-bedroom apartment with Blitz anymore. M and M are a young married couple. Eventually they might want to have children and will have less time to spend with Blitz. So he has to make the best decision for himself and actively look for the future he wants to have. And he doesn't actually want to be a possession. He is far too free-spirited for that. He wants to be loved and he wants to give love. He knows that Stolas is sweet and gentle, and that's why he loves him. That's why he wants to be with him. But the problem for Blitz is that there is a difference between what he knows and what he believes. He knows that Stolas has feelings for him, he just doesn't believe it. But he was challenged in his perception of Stolas at the end of Western Energy when he realized that he can in fact get hurt. And so we finally get to the full moon. At this point, as a result of rekindling his friendship with Fizz, Blitz has become nicer and begins to show appreciation for the people around him.
Harp shooting there, Mox. Pro as usual. Millie, beautiful bloody mess in there.
Fuck!
Basically, even though Barbie rejected him, the fact that he could reconcile with Fizz gives Blitz the hope that he is not a total lost cause for people to actually care about him. And he feels this further confirmation when Stolas finally tells him to come over on the full moon once again. Although he is worried about why their arrangement has been on hiatus for several months now.
Are we okay? Can't really say. I'm getting by avoiding his questions.
I feel compelled to exonerate Luna for the blame some people seem to have placed on her for getting in Blitz's head with the "he's getting bored of you" bit, but Blitz has this habit of looking for confirmation for his negative thoughts.
Oh, well that's definitely your clue right there that it's all bullshit.
I know, right?
So the reason her comment throws him off as much as it does is because this is what he is already thinking. But this is where the arrangement has kind of taken a dark twist for Blitz. Because at this point, Blitz has befriended Asmodeus himself. IMP can therefore no longer be said to be dependent on the grimoire for their business operations, because Blitz could just use his contact to get a hold of a crystal and therefore no longer need the book. But he does need the book, because with his lack of self-worth and the fact that he has put Stolas on a pedestal, Blitz doesn't believe that Stolas would want to have anything to do with him outside of their arrangement. So he wants to keep the arrangement going. And because Stolas has forgiven him for a lot of major mistakes and has just let him have the grimoire free of charge for several months already, Blitz has faith that Stolas wouldn't just leave him with nothing. So now Blitz wants to keep the arrangement going as a way to hold on to Stolas. Quite interestingly, when he is in the office and he is worried about Stolas being bored with him, as soon as he looks at the grimoire, he regains his confidence in the deal. He knows that Stolas is too good-natured just to screw him over. So as long as Stolas believes that he is the one who provides IMP with access to the living world, then Blitz gets to keep the arrangement going. So instead, Blitz concerns himself more with enticing Stolas to get back into bed with him so that he can get their relationship back to normal and manageable. And the really sad part is that he is so concerned with keeping things sexual that he doesn't consider his own emotions in the whole mess. When he's in the candle store and the shopkeeper is asking him about the mood, all he can say is
just horny, very, very horny, max horny.
Nothing about romance or reunion, even though we can see from the doodles on his calendar that he has missed Stolas a lot. He is looking so forward to this night, and he's drawn such a happy little Stolas in the bottom corner who looks enamored with the fact that it's the full moon. So there is a clear difference of Blitz's perception of the situation depending on whether he listens to his heart or to his head. Blitz is still in this one-sided relationship wherein he lets Stolas give him so much emotional comfort, but he just can't see that he is good enough as he is, that if he did the same, it would make Stolas happy. Although he did listen to his instincts when he felt like dressing up. So maybe on some level, if the night had gone as Blitz was expecting, he might have continued to follow his instincts and actually shown some affection towards Stolas. Like maybe he would have cuddled up to Stolas afterwards and fallen asleep, and then maybe he would have allowed himself to stay in the morning if Stolas offered him. We will never know. Although, in all fairness to Blitz, there is one way he has allowed himself to show Stolas affection, and that is in the bedroom. As we can see from my favorite shard from All to You, the kiss. And you can absolutely not convince me that Blitz did not initiate this kiss. His hand is on the back of Stolas' head, pulling him into this kiss. And the other Stolas-related doodle on his calendar is about to be inundated by a parade of smiling dicks. Sexually is the one way he has allowed himself to indulge fully in what being with Stolas could mean. It's the only thing he feels he has any control over. But Blitz purposefully ignores the very clear warning signs he has that this night is not gonna be as usual. He tries to calm himself down from all of his doubts and his uncertainties, but he knows something's different, because otherwise he wouldn't have been let off the hook so many times already. But he's so scared of being vulnerable and having an adult conversation that he doesn't prepare himself for the possibility that maybe something has changed for Stolas that will require them to actually talk. And now we get to the heartbreaking scene. When Blitz shows up at the palace, the big smile on his face, he is so excited to see Stolas again. He's acting as if there was no time lost between them. He goes immediately for the bag and starts showing off all of the things he's bought. And this is amazing voice work by Brandon Rogers. Blitz sounds so excited and happy, yet also clearly desperate to hold on to the situationship.
Guess what I got for us? I got lots of fun shit for us to play with tonight.
But he's so focused focused on getting back to dirty business that he doesn't even notice that Stolas didn't greet him when he showed up. And even though the arrangement exists because Stolas has to use the grimoire on the full moon, Blitz has pushed it to the back of his mind. Like, this night isn't about the grimoire, it's about them. Stolas is not the obstacle to get to the grimoire is the ticket to get to Stolas. So when Stolas tells Blitz that he wants the grimoire back permanently, Blitz panics. Yet the interesting thing to note is that he pleads to keep the book because he needs it. That's his only argument. I need it. I need the book. Not we need it. Please, if you take the book away from me, then I don't have a business anymore. Blitz needs the grimoire. It's his security blanket. And the fact that there are tears in his eyes here is reminiscent of Ozzy's because he doesn't really cry in front of people. He doesn't like to show emotional vulnerability, which is why the rest of IMP have no idea how to handle him when he breaks down.
You've just always been so unbothered by everything.
The only time any of them have seen any vulnerability from him is if he's somehow intoxicated.
I've had one too many emotions for today.
The only people he cries in front of when sober is Fizz and Stolas. Also noteworthy that when Blitz is trying to make sense of why Stolas wants the grimoire back from him, he asks if it's because he skipped out on the deal when Stolas let him.
No, hold on, Stolas, come on. Is this because I've taken up skipping a few rounds with you in bed because I'm busy?
He says it in such a way to take the blame onto himself. This is my fault because clearly you wanted me to come over. I was just busy. This is entirely on me. It is not about you. Blitz is just so willing to take the blame for everything, to assume that everything is automatically his fault. And then Stolas presents him with an Asmodean crystal. And so there is no excuse to hold on to the grimoire anymore because now he doesn't need it. But he wants to hold on to Stolas so badly, so once again he changes the situation around to take blame onto himself. He turns it into a matter of him not being good enough in bed anymore. It is such a heartbreaking moment, the way he crouches down, he becomes smaller, and his tail does a little whip. He reverts back to his childhood of never feeling good enough. The one thing he felt confident about with regards to his relationship to Stolas is that he is good in bed, and now that just isn't enough anymore. He pleads to be allowed to prove himself, and he turns the box around in an effort to try and get Stolas to take it back from him.
I don't understand. Why are you giving me this? Am I not, like, fucking you good enough? Because I can always do better.
And because he is so desperate to hold on to his bird, he can't hear the rationale of the conclusion Stolas has come to that the arrangement was wrong. But the arrangement didn't feel really wrong to Blitz, because everything is already a transaction, so why should this be any different? And so in this childlike state and feeling powerless, Blitz just stands there and lets Stolas talk. And Stolas takes him on quite the emotional roller coaster here, because he goes from ending their arrangement to say it was wrong all along, but then ends up asking Blitz to stay. And Blitz wants to believe what he's saying. He wants to be proven right about having grown comfortable with Stolas for putting up with him so long, for providing him with so much emotional fulfillment, and for forgiving him for the big mistakes he made. But because he has such a low opinion of himself and such a high opinion of Stolas, he is terrified of allowing himself to believe that this is true if there is even the slightest possibility that it isn't. So at this moment, the choices he has is to assume that Stolas is being genuine and risk the humiliation if this is not true, or to assume that this is the most messed up roleplay of all time. And unfortunately, he chooses the latter because at least this way, he still gets to keep Stolas and he doesn't get hurt.
Okay, alright, you're fucking with me. This is an interesting roleplay. Never done this one, but I can get into it.
And then once again, he is excited about turning the night back to what he was expecting it to be. And he fully dedicates himself to this romantic roleplay scenario, only for Stolas to shut him down. And the way his mouth droops here, he was going in for a kiss. So now Stolas stands up, thanks Blitz for their time together, and just walks away, giving Blitz absolutely no time to process what just happened. And because his emotions at this point are so all over the place, feeling powerless and rejected, Blitz chases after Stolas and demands an explanation. Then Stolas reveals that he has had feelings for Blitz for a long time, and ends up basically saying that what they had, their sexual situationship arrangement, doesn't actually mean anything to Blitz.
The fact that you couldn't believe that I might have these feelings about you, that your first instinct is that it's always about sex. That's enough to know what this is.
Which cuts deep into Blitz, because this is obviously not true. He spent all day excited and preparing to come here. He got all dressed up. He thought he was proving to Stolas that he wanted to be here as long as Stolas wanted him here, but he didn't get to do that. So Blitz lashes out and he begins chastising Stolas for the class difference between them. However, the curious thing about his rant here is that it isn't exactly personal to Stolas. Blitz does say, "After everything you put me through," but the rest of it is generalizations. It's your kind versus my kind.
I mean, you royal fucks think you can do this every time. Like you can just play with our feelings because we're smaller and not as important.
Blitz has plenty of things he could throw at Stolas, things that are personal to the relationship between the two of them. But he goes with this, which does seem to indicate that he has crossed paths with a royal in the past who either hurt him personally or hurt someone he cared about personally. And he is projecting this pain onto Stolas. But he's also clearly hoping that by yelling at Stolas and getting Stolas to yell back at him, they will get to the core of their issues. If they just yell at each other long enough, they will reach a truth that they can then talk about, the same way he did when he reconnected with Fizz. But the problem is that there is quite the difference between a fresh wound of a failed romance and a 15-year-old grudge between two people who have missed each other so much. But by the time Blitz realizes his mistake, it's already too late, because he has already hurt Stolas so much that now Stolas clearly feels that Blitz hates him and that it's over. And just as Blitz wants to apologize, Stolas portals him out of the palace. But hey, at least now he has the time to think, just as he asked for. Right? Right? Yeah, I just remembered what happens when Blitz gets to think. Now he has all night to consider what happened, to weigh his feelings, and to consider what he did wrong and how he made Stolas cry. But his brain does that amazing thing it does, wherein it minimizes the situation so that it wasn't really that bad. And because it's Stolas, who forgave him for being caught by humans, for getting him humiliated in public, for losing his grimoire when it was stolen by a teenage girl, for failing to rescue him from the assassin he never warned him about, why shouldn't they be able to move past this? This wasn't technically nearly as bad as any of the other things, so why shouldn't they be able to move on from it? So Blitz tries sending out some feelers in the form of memes to provide some levity, to remind Stolas that he's gay, and that's why they were having their affair. And allegedly he sends a lot of memes, and when he doesn't get a response, Blitz just decides that it's easier to invite himself over. Problem solved! And this is Blitz in full-on damage control mode. He is desperate to hold on to Stolas by any means necessary, except of course the most useful way, which would be having an actual adult conversation with him, because that would be really difficult. So instead Blitz looks to his past self, who successfully seduced Stolas in the first place, and he decides to double down on that. I was a bit confused when I learned that there are some people who misread the seduction scene from the circus as Blitz essentially threatening Stolas into having sex with him, because the powerful magical demon who can create portals and petrify others with his eyes would be threatened by a seemingly unarmed imp just because he was an assassin. Yeah, that is just not the case. Blitz came on to Stolas, and he came on hard because he could tell that the bird wanted him. So with this success in mind, Blitz is hoping that he can do it once again, except this time he has to navigate around hurt feelings. He tries to appeal to the good nature Stolas has previously shown him with providing him the means to get to Earth. So he insists that they should have sex so that he feels better about doing his business. And he still clings on to what they had, because what they had was good for him. But he is still terrified of committing to Stolas. He still doesn't think he is good enough. So when Stolas reveals that he has been invited to a party for all of Blitz's ex-lovers, Blitz just declares that relationships are boring and digs himself so much deeper into the hole that it becomes increasingly more difficult for him to apologize to Stolas, because he keeps creating new things he will have to apologize for. I gotta admit, the first time I watched Apology Tour, I was confused as to why Blitz didn't come with any of the legitimate arguments he could have against Stolas for his past behavior. But then I realized that Blitz's goal is not to be right, he just wants Stolas back. So he just pretty much doesn't care about any of the things Stolas previously did wrong, because that would be a serious argument and he's not willing to risk it. So every single time Stolas tries turning this into a conversation wherein they talk about their feelings, Blitz ruins it by making it sexual. And he doesn't want to be honest and vulnerable and talk about his feelings and apologize. So even when he accidentally does just that, and Stolas is willing to hear him out and have a conversation with him, Blitz has to fuck it up because it's too much for him.
Well, fuck you!
So instead he once again sets out on a pointless mission to go on his apology tour and apologize to all these people he doesn't actually care about, while avoiding apologizing to people he actually does care for things he actually should feel guilty for. Basically, if he can fulfill this quest, he can go to Stolas and say, look, I did it. I apologize to everyone. He thinks that if he can do this, he can avoid having to actually apologize to Stolas for his mistakes, but still have Stolas forgive him. Yet throughout the day, as he just says sorry over and over again, it begins to feel so easy that he wants to text Stolas and apologize, but he doesn't believe that his apologies are good enough for Stolas. And then, at quite the detriment to his mental health, he decides to attend the anti-Blitzo party and confront all of his exes. And the realization that so many people hate him hurts him really bad. But the thing that hits the most is when Stolas takes the stage and sings All to You, and Blitz now hears how much he hurt Stolas. Because all this time they've known each other in their situationship, seemingly about a year, Stolas apparently thinks that none of it meant anything to Blitz. And this is essentially what his subconscious tried to warn him about all the way back in Truth Seekers. That if he doesn't treat the people around him right, they will leave him.
It's rather unfortunate, sir, considering it's often how you treat those who stand by you, such as myself. Are you worried I may have enough of it one day as well?
But Blitz was so hopeful that Stolas wouldn't leave him, that he would be his savior. Everyone else could leave, even Moxie. Yet, as it turns out, Stolas is the one who leaves, because Blitz avoided over and over again to show Stolas that he actually cared for him. But now, because of the song, Blitz finally feels compelled to actually apologize to Stolas. But unfortunately, Stolas is drunk and has just poured his heart out, so he can't really take in what Blitz is trying to say to him. And Blitz is still fighting with himself and his instincts. He knows that he wants to apologize, but he can't quite get there. So he wavers through it until he finally gets to a place wherein he is actually being honest and vulnerable, even with himself. But because Stolas is inebriated and very sad, he can't really support Blitz in this breakthrough he's going through. And so instead, Blitz ends up saying the worst thing he could possibly say to Stolas at this moment, which is that he deserves better, only for Stolas to then pour his heart out to Blitz for what he always dreamed of in a relationship. And then as he's talking and he's telling Blitz about these very simple things he wants from a romantic partner, it begins to dawn on Blitz that all of those little things that Stolas had done all along, that Blitz had grown so attached to, but didn't think about reciprocating, were the very things that Stolas just wants in return.
I just want someone to care if I stay or go. I want someone to want me, to want to see me, to hold me, look at me and think, well, you're the only one I want. I desire to hold you and talk to you, never let you feel so.
Blitz had lived off of this one-sided relationship where he would just never show his true feelings to Stolas. Like the pictures Stolas has of Blitz on his phone, Blitz always looks miserable in them, while Blitz has a picture on his phone of the two of them wherein he is himself smiling, but Stolas is asleep. And it looks as if the photo Blitz uses for Stolas as his contact in his phone is a photo of the portrait in Stolas' bedroom. So basically Blitz wanted to have pictures of Stolas in his phone, but he didn't want to take any pictures that Stolas would actually know about. He also has Stolas' contact as Stolitz, the nickname he only calls him now that he's trying to apologize.
He said sorry a lot today, and honestly, didn't really mean any of it, because the only one I wanted to say it to was you, Stolas.
And though Blitz's ability to spell is ambiguous, I just find it a little bit funny that in Seeing Stars, when he texted Millie, he also very specifically referred to Stolas as Stols. So he could use the secret nickname for his not boyfriend in a way no one would ever notice. And you could absolutely convince me that all those memes he sends are from a folder he has saved on his phone titled Stolas Would Love These. And so as he's taking in these things that Stolas is saying to him, Blitz finally realizes how badly he wants to be with Stolas. How he wants Stolas to keep giving him these things, and he wants to reciprocate and give them in return. And even more importantly, he finally begins seeing Stolas for the person he is, instead of just the prince. He mentions 3 times within the episode that Stolas is a prince. He keeps holding on to the divide between them, prince versus imp. But the same way as he's willing to admit that he knows that him being an imp doesn't make him unlovable.
I mean, you're a fucking prince. How could you ever actually care for an imp? Me. How could anybody?
He recognizes that Stolas being a prince doesn't make him above having feelings. It doesn't make him above getting hurt, either physically or emotionally. Stolas is in love with him, and he is capable of making his own decisions about who he wants to be with. No one else gets to decide if the two of them can be together. But he can't quite bring himself to comfort Stolas because he is the one who caused him so much pain. Yet he isn't entirely deterred when Stolas tells him to leave. He still wants to make another attempt at repairing their relationship. And then just as he's about to say this to Stolas, they get interrupted by Better Than Blitz guy. And at this very last moment where Blitz could hold on to Stolas, all he has to do is say, please don't go. Please stay here with me so that we can talk. Blitz tries just for this moment to be selfless, to let Stolas go off and have some fun, hoping that afterwards they can continue their conversation with Stolas in a better mood.
Looks like Stolas is having a good time.
Yeah, well, he needs it.
And then having had a bit of an emotional breakthrough, Blitz goes to talk to Vivziepop to try and make amends with the only other person at the party he has some care for. Yet because of the animosity between the two of them, Blitz reverts back to his jerk ways, only for Vivziepop to finally break through to him and explain to him why this party is happening every year. And Blitz finally accepts responsibility for his consistent bad actions towards others. And then for the first time in his adult life, he gets his heart romantically broken when Better Than Blitz guy kisses Stolas and Stolas kisses him back with a big smile on his face, because finally he gets the romance he craves that Blitz never gave him.
Oh, that bird-stealing cockbat!
And with Vivziepop's advice, Blitz realizes that if he can't give Stolas what he needs, then he has to let him go, even if it is painful for him. So he just quietly leaves the party and lets Stolas have his fun. And then if we accept the shorts as part of the continuity in the order in which they were released, it's clear that everything reminds Blitz of Stolas. In Mission Antarctica, he struggles to use the Asmodean crystal because, having just been repeatedly rejected by Stolas, Blitz's sexual confidence is gone.
I've never been good at this shit!
Emberlyn is just a much more extreme and awkward version of Stolas from their first meeting in the circus.
What are you gonna do to me, Blitzy-coon?
Okay, Blitz, what are you doing to me?
And then in Mission Chupacabras, even though there isn't really anything that should be reminding him of Stolas, Blitz finds a way to remind himself of his bird.
The only sucking I do is on cloacas!
And with all of that, it makes perfect sense that Blitz has just spiraled completely by the time we get to Ghostfuckers, wherein he just can't function because everything reminds him of Stolas. Everything is painful.
I'm coping!
And so he just completely self-destructs and begins ruining his business and tries to eat himself into the grave. And pretty much mistreating the rest of the IMP gang who have no idea how to support him. And even though he is so sad and so completely down in the dumps, he still wants to be with Stolas. And he is so hurt and regretful at the reality that they never even had an actual relationship he can actually mourn over.
I don't get it, Blitz. All this over a breakup?
It was not a breakup! You need a relationship for one of those, and we never had that. And we never will.
Now, pathetic as he is, it makes a lot of sense that Blitz takes this heartbreak so badly, because this is the first time in his adult life that he has to actually deal with heartbreak. So he has no frame of reference of how to deal with it. All of his other issues he has been able to somewhat brush off, because there has always been a big catastrophe attached to them. But the way things ends with Stolas are relatively small and intimate. It wasn't a big catastrophe like the fire or Blitz's habits of self-destructing in a relationship. It was intimate. It was hurt feelings and arguments. If Stolas had ended the deal after Aussies, Blitz would have completely understood it. Or if he had demanded the grimoire back after realizing that Blitz wasn't being entirely careful with it, it would have made sense. But as it happened, everything ultimately came down to Blitz himself. It came down to how he had acted, and even though he had reached a point where he wanted to change and he didn't want to be that person anymore, it was too late for him to prove that to Stolas because he didn't have the arrangement as an excuse to be around Stolas anymore so that he could prove himself. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, I was actually pretty impressed that Blitz hadn't turned to sex as a coping mechanism until of course he goes on his ghost fucking mission. But the interesting thing there is that of course ghosts aren't real people, so he wouldn't be hurting yet another person who would then eventually find their way to the anti-Blitz party. Although I would like to believe that having now finally gotten an actual apology from him, Rosika is not gonna host the party anymore, and with her apparently still working across the hall in the same building as IMP, maybe there is some hope for a renewed friendship between the two of them. It would be great to see Blitz making amends with people from his past, because it was so sad in the POV sequence when even though he has rekindled his friendship with Fizz, he still sees the negative parts. He still saw the moment Fizz called him out in Aussies. And of course in typical Blitz fashion, everything that had to do with Stolas in that sequence was all the mistakes Blitz made himself. None of it was Stolas. He sees the moments he rejected Stolas in Aussies, but he doesn't see the moment where Stolas hit his face in the menu. Rolando was torturing him with his own mistakes, not any of the legitimate reasons he had to behave the way he did. But at least it was cathartic to see that Blitz understands the connection between him rejecting Stolas in Aussies and Stolas presenting him with the Asmodean crystal in the full moon. And even though it just doubles down on a lesson from Truth Seekers, the whole apology tour sequence, where Blitz sees the moments he continuously pushed Stolas further and further away from himself until he lost him completely. But the most important thing for Blitz that happens in Ghostfuckers is when Millie finally breaks through to him about what a positive impact he has had on her life, how she looks up to him and she regards him as her best friend, which then leads to Blitz finally accepting that they are actually friends and admitting that he no longer feels compelled to sexualize Millie because he knows that she will stick by him.
I've never had a real friend that I didn't want to fuck.
Now he just needs to learn how to feel the same way about Moxie and Fizz, but hopefully that'll happen. And he also reaches a point of clarity wherein he realizes that he wants his own relationship. He doesn't want to be part of Eminem's marriage.
The bird got to you that bad, huh?
I guess.
I also really appreciate how Millie takes on most of the fight with the Infestor Demon, and then in the end Blitz is the one who kills him, as this is the metaphor for the support Millie provides for Blitz. Finally someone is able to help him when he can't help himself, so he can begin to climb out of his rut. And obviously Millie was only able to do this because she was the one person Blitz had been honest with about how he felt about her. I think this was also kind of what he was hoping for by making Luna burn all of those owls, because it would make most sense that it would be cathartic for Blitz to destroy these symbols of Stolas, but by making Luna do it, even if he isn't going to watch her do it, it's kind of like he's hoping that she can make the pain disappear. I definitely hope to see a more tight-knit IMP moving forward, because this show is supposed to be about the relationships between the characters, so I really hope we get to see a renewed dynamic and all four of them begin acting more like a team. At the current point in the series, as far as Blitz is concerned, his relationship to Stolas is over, and he has given up hope for them to have a second chance. Luckily, this is purposeful irony. From the trailer, we know that Blitz will end up defending Stolas against Andrelphis, so their paths definitely will cross once again, and everything else in the story seems to point at them ending up together at the end of this season. And I think that's the best thing for their love story, because the two of them definitely also need to grow as people, and now having analyzed both of them, it's clear to me that they've grown more together than they ever could have apart. They need each other so they can challenge and support each other, which will force them to grow. And I really hope that part of that growth includes Stolas standing up to the other royals and declaring his love for Blitz, because that would really mean so much to Blitz. Alright, so that's it for my Blitz analysis, and Christ on a stick did this take me way too long to record, and it's going to take so much longer to edit. Anyway, thank you so much for watching my video all the way through. Thank you for your patience with how long it took me to make. Please like the video, leave a comment, share the video with anyone you know who would enjoy it, subscribe to my channel, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!